Brian sat on the bench and looked at the picture of his wife. Life in general is an unpredictable thing. So many things happen, and most of the time we make mistakes, and the rest of the time we try to correct them. He and June had known each other for a long time. About 25 years ago, they had met, dated, and even thought they were going to spend the rest of their lives together. But then, just as Brian was about to propose to June, he met Kelly. If June was quiet, modest, and generally very quiet, Kelly was the complete opposite: a fire, a volcano, a denial of any rules. Brian lost his head. A week later, Kelly said hotly, breathing down his neck, "I want to go with you to the edge of the world, to the farthest edge, and be there with you alone." And he finally lost his mind. He left everything, and they left at night. The first time he was tormented by remorse, and then life spun. Kelly, however, soon wanted to go to the other side of the world, but no longer with him. Frankly, in the 5 years they had been together, Kelly had shaken his nervous system. And when she made the decision to shake it to another man, Brian was just happy. He didn't go back, especially since no one was expecting him here. He was ashamed, too. He thought if he met June, whom he had left without a word, he would vanish into thin air. He worked hard. By the time he was 30, he had his own little business, and by the time he was 40, he was considered the richest man in those parts. There was one thing he wasn't: happiness. No, he had women, of course, but he didn't want to tie his life together with any of them. For a long time, he did not understand what it was and why. Until one day, he realized that he compared any representative of the female sex to June. And then he made the decision to go back. He did everything fast, so as not to give himself time to change his mind. When he settled in a new place, he started looking for June. Very cautiously realized that she might be married, and then he found her. June was in hospice. She was dying. He entered the room then and froze when he saw her. June was already almost transparent, but she recognized him. "Brian, is that you?" He came back. He saw a tear roll down her cheek and rushed to her, his face pressed against her arm. "June, my dear June, everything will be all right." She grinned faintly, and Brian rushed to the doctor. "You have to understand, there's no chance. She has a month left, maybe a month and a half. There's no way that's possible. It's too late. There's nothing you can do about it. The most you can do for her is to brighten her last days somehow." Brian tried his best. He took June, hired her the best caregivers. One day, as he was sitting next to her, he asked, "Say, what would you like?" "Well, what is your dream?" June smiled weakly. "You know, I do have a dream. Or rather, two. I always wanted to marry you when you left. I had already found a wedding dress and imagined myself in it. I even saw our wedding so beautiful." Brian squeezed his eyes shut, then said, "We're going to have a real wedding, I promise you that." He stood up and was about to leave, but stopped. "And the other one? I'll tell you about it later. I'll be sure to tell you later." 2 days later, June, who could hardly stand, leaning on his arm in her wedding dress with her beautiful hair and tears in her eyes, became his wife. She held on as best she could and was even able to attend the festive dinner. There weren't many people, though. He had not yet had time to make friends here, so the guests mostly consisted of medical staff. Of those with whom June had been in contact lately, and 3 days later she got worse. June was rushed to the hospital. Brian didn't leave her side and put all the work to his deputy. Thank goodness he was reliable. He knew it was the end. June, what about the second dream? There was something you wanted to tell me." But June didn't answer. A week later she was gone. Brian wasn't just sobbing. He was growling like a wounded animal with absolutely everything to blame on him. If he had come sooner, if he hadn't left at all. Today was exactly 40 days since June was with him. The man got up heavily, ran his hand over the photo, and walked toward the exit of the cemetery. He didn't want to go home. It was so lonely there. Brian seriously considered getting a cat, but immediately dismissed the thought. Who would be with him if he was in his office all the time? Walked through the rooms, looked at the layer of dust. A woman used to go to him twice a week to clean, but she had quit a month ago, gone to her grandchildren. Need to find a new housekeeper. The doorbell rang. He went to open it. There was a skinny girl standing in front of him, looking at him with huge eyes. "Hello. Excuse me, please. Your neighbors told me you might have a job for me." Brian looked at her curiously. "What kind of job are you looking for?" "Oh, I don't have to choose in my situation anyway. I can clean, cook, tend the garden. All I want is a job. And if it's possible, with a place to live." "Well, come in. Do you have any papers?" "Yes, of course here. There's references from the last job." Brian was going through the paperwork. The girl was almost 22 years old, and he looked up at her. "Does the child have a father?" He nodded at the still small but already noticeable tummy. The girl was not embarrassed. "Of course she does. You can't have a child without a father, but only at the beginning level." He decided to wash his hands of the problem. "You're not from this town, are you?" "No." "Why did you come to us?" "There's a reason. I don't really want to talk about it right now. Maybe later." Brian thought for a while, then answered, "Okay, I'll take you, but with a trial period. I've never hired through an agency before." "Yes, I understand." "Thank you, I'll do my best." "Come on, I'll show you the room and what's where." 3 days later, Brian didn't know how he had lived without Miranda. Everything at home was radiant, and this despite the fact that his house was huge. There were such aromas coming from the kitchen all the time that he thought he was in some very good restaurant. One evening, pushing his empty plate away from him, Brian said with a smile, "Miranda, if you're going to cook this good all the time, I'm going to get fat soon." She laughed. "Come on, you eat once a day. Only coffee in the morning and you're gone all day." "Miranda, tell me, have you registered?" "No, I don't know yet." "No, I don't know where to go yet." "I'll call someone I know and he'll see you." "Thank you very much." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Now, are you going to tell me, what was the reason for you coming to our city?" "Well, what happened to the child's father?" Miranda sat down, sighed. "Okay, I'll start in order. The father of the child is the nephew of the people I worked on before you. They are very decent and good people. And the owner wanted to get the guy to marry me, but I refused. Kind of burned out all at once. I was so disgusted, so I decided to leave, especially since my mother lives somewhere in this town." "You don't know where your mother lives." "How could that be?" "Oh, that's a very strange story. I grew up in an orphanage. My mother left me in the orphanage and ran away. All my life I thought she was, well, how shall I put it gently, not very nice. But about a year ago, I got a big letter from her. You see, she left me, not because she didn't love me, but because she couldn't do otherwise. She was alone with no money, no support. Her fiancé had left her when she was pregnant. But she didn't blame him. She said he didn't know she was pregnant. My mother wanted to pick me up later, but she couldn't find me. All this time she was looking for me and found me when I was an adult. She wrote that she would understand if I didn't want to communicate with her, but she wanted me to know that my parents were not drunks or drug addicts. Dad was from this town too, but had gone somewhere far away. She lived here. Then the pregnancy didn't work out so well for her. And now she's sick, but she says she's fighting, that she's sure to beat the disease. and she'll wait until we see each other. I was very confused at first. I was adopted 3 times, and all 3 times I ended up back in an orphanage, either paying little for me or the adoptive parents having a child of their own. But it didn't matter. I got used to no one needing me, including my mother, but she wrote so. For a year, I couldn't make up my mind about anything. And then everything came together like that, and I decided to come here. I want to find her. I want to talk to her. Brian listened and didn't understand what was bothering him. And then he realized this story was very similar to his and June's. Except June didn't have children. He looked at Miranda and felt a drop of sweat roll down his back. "Miranda, may I see this letter?" "Yes." "I'm sorry, are you all right? Have you gone pale somehow?" "Yes, Miranda, I'm fine." "Could you bring me that letter, please?" Miranda went out, and Brian went to the window. "No, of course it's nothing. It simply cannot be. But he will certainly help Miranda. She has no one else to help her." The girl came back and handed him a puffy envelope. He unwrapped a few pieces of paper, and he felt quite sick. June had an interesting habit, when he was writing, of putting an interesting note above the T all the time. He had never seen anyone else do that. Now he was looking at these notes, and he wanted to cry. "What's the matter with you?" He didn't answer. He was reading what June had written to his daughter, who she had been forced to leave because of him. Finally, he put the pieces of paper aside. "Miranda, get ready." The girl looked at him in surprise. "Where to?" "I know where your mother is." The girl got up slowly, went into the hallway, came back. "Maybe tomorrow. She probably needs to be warned that we're coming." "No, Miranda, she doesn't need to be warned." 40 minutes later, they were standing at June's grave. "I just now realized that you are very much alike. Maybe that's why I didn't refuse you, even though I didn't realize it." A tear rolled down Miranda's cheek. One and then another. She didn't wait for me. She fought as hard as she could, but she couldn't. Brian didn't stop Miranda from crying. Maybe she had yet to find out that he was the man who had betrayed her mother, who had robbed her of her childhood. He didn't know what she would say, how she would behave, but he supposed that the girl just might not want to see him. They returned home. Brian, seeing the state she was in, decided to save his revelations for later. Before retiring to her room, Miranda looked at him carefully. "Are you the man?" "Mom's fiancé." He sighed, lost, nodding his head. Miranda stared at him for another second, then silently disappeared into her room. He was sure his daughter was awake. He himself crouched from corner to corner in the study. Feeling like a father and even almost a grandfather was strange, but he knew that this feeling was not sad. He was happy that he was not alone now. The door of Miranda's room slammed. He stepped out into the hall. The girl was getting dressed next to her with the bag she had come with. "Miranda, won't you even listen to me?" She looked at him, frightened. "I thought you were asleep. Why are you leaving? You can't forgive me." She sat down on a pouf in the hallway, dropped her face in her hands, and spoke. "When I was a little girl, I dreamed so much about having a family. I knew I would never find my parents. Only a few find them, and not always a happy ending. I thought that if I got married, we'd have at least 3 children, but it didn't work out that way either. I don't blame you for anything. I guess that's what I should have done at the time. I'm not a judge of what you did or what my mother did. It happened as it happened. I can't stay." Brian even raised his voice. "Miranda, but why? You know there's room for all of us. Why can't you, if you're not mad at me?" She looked up at him. "You'll think I stayed because of your money." He laughed. "Nonsense. It's not your fault you found a millionaire father. Miranda, I ask you to stay. I also miss my family very much." 4 months later, a sturdy baby boy was born. Brian looked at his grandson in amazement. "He's so small, so pretty, and I'm a grandfather." The man carefully took the baby in his arms and felt something protective in his eyes. He quickly turned away so that Miranda wouldn't notice anything. But it wasn't to be. She put her hand on his shoulder. "Dad, what are you doing?" Brian held her tightly against him with his other hand. "Oh, Miranda, what a life we're going to have now. Henry's going hunting and fishing with me. We'll box with him." Miranda laughed. "Dad, not so fast. He can't even walk yet." "It's okay. We'll learn everything together in no time."